It makes me think of, in an odd way, the gifts that my mom's death gave me. And I think one of those gifts is this ability to understand that people all have stories. And often what we see on the outside is not what's really going on. So to not judge, to have more empathy, to have more compassion, I think those are all things that her passing has allowed me to develop more for myself.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. I am chatting with Jaya Saxena today. She is a devoted mother of two, an inclusion strategist, and she has nearly 20 years of professional experience. And she is also an aspiring death doula. So we will be talking about her own grief experiences after the passing of her mother when she was in her 20s, when Jaya was in her 20s, and other types of grief that she's experienced in her life, which don't include death, which you guys all know when you're listening to this, that I do mention that often and a lot in my conversations, is that grief does not only happen when we are grieving somebody's passing, but it can happen in any major change in our lives. So, Jaya, welcome.
Thank you, Kendra. I really appreciate the opportunity to be in conversation with you, and just truly grateful for the space that you have created with your podcast to have these conversations.
Well, I am so glad that you're here and that you found the podcast and reached out to be on the show. Curious, how long have you been searching? I know your mom passed many years ago, but how long have you been searching for spaces that have to do
Oh,
with podcasts and listening to podcasts, and also in this aspiring world now of being a death doula?
that's such an interesting question, because I think I have been reluctant to talk about my experience with grief, yet at the same time, I've been craving the opportunity to talk about it. It's sort of this both and, even today, being a little bit, sort of having a little bit of nervous, anxious energy around talking about the experience, but at the same time, recognizing how important it is to share our stories and really wanting that space. And so, probably within the past 2-3 years, I've been very intentionally looking out for spaces where I could be in conversation with others about the experience of grief. And I'm so pleased that I came across the work that you do.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, it's interesting because even as you're saying this, your mom passed in your 20s when you were in college, in law school, correct? So you're
Right
about to start
before
law
law.
school. You have, yeah, right before law school, and we're going to that. And it's here. I don't want to age you unless you're okay with
I'm
saying
okay
how
with
many.
it.
Okay, so
I'm
now you are
47 as
okay.
of
Now,
this month.
yay. Okay, so you're 47 this month. So 20 years later, pretty much, is that then you're like more into the searching of this grief journey. And I love that you're sharing this, because a lot of times people think that when grief happens, it's like that first week, that first month, that first year, that first this of without, with our person. But we don't realize that these feelings of grief can come later on. And in your experience, we will talk also about how it was being a mother without your mother present and how that brought up as well. So that's kind of just so that the audience gets a taste of where we're going with the conversation, as well as the other types of grief, meaning like the identity component of the before your mom passed and after, and other aspects regarding even motherhood. So let's start with you. Tell us about your upbringing. Where did you grow up? A little bit of your family dynamics, your siblings, and more about your dear mom as well.
Oh, thank you for that question. So, my parents had an arranged marriage. We are Indian. They were born and raised in India, and then my sister and I were born here in the United States. They had an arranged marriage and then immigrated to the US in the 70s. And they, as many immigrant families, I think wanted the best for their family, the best for their children. And they made tremendous sacrifices to create a better life for my sister and I. So I have an older sister. She was born in California, and then they literally packed all of their belongings on top of this tiny car and drove across the country, eventually landing in New Jersey, which is where I was born. And then we made our way to Washington D.C., which is where I wasn't born, but where I have been raised. You know, now have my family. I left for a number of years for school and education, and then returned. And so grew up here. By the time I hit high school, I think I was really ready to explore my independence. And I did decide to leave for college and law school, returning back in 2005. And so I think the piece that really is so important to me is their immigrant story and the experience I had growing up navigating two cultures, two traditions, two worlds, essentially, with their um, sort of values and what was important to them from a heritage, cultural perspective, but then growing up here in the US.
So you're first generation.
Yes.
You are first generation.
Yeah.
Now, interesting. Right before we got on a podcast, I was exercising and watching a show, and in the show, it's a makeover show, like a house makeover show. It's called Revealed, something like that. There's just a little plug in there. But the designer likes to include heritage components in the designs of like her home, and the home that she was designing was actually an Indian family, first generation. So I was like, oh, like as you're talking about this. So how was it for you to incorporate? Because the guests in that show, like they were saying how for them they tended to be not wanting to be proud of their heritage when they moved here. Well, but no, they were born here, but they were kind of, and now as adults and raising kids, they want to make sure that their children know about their heritage. So, how was it for you being first generation American with incorporating your culture from your parents and that and then has that shifted through the years being a mom?
Yes. Well, so I think growing up, their commitment was to their country of origin, so to India. And a lot of the values that we were raised with were hard work, being resourceful in order to be successful. And yet, at the same time, when I was younger, especially as a child and in my teenage years, we all know how those years are or can be for young girls, I really wanted to fit in. And so on the one hand, you know, I remember going to the beach and packing a picnic basket with our family that was full of Indian food. And my mom would be sitting on the beach in her sari versus my girlfriends having sleepovers and trying out for the cheerleading squad and wearing the latest brand. So it was sort of this, where is it that I fit in? Where do I belong? And I don't think it was until later in life where I really started to appreciate the traditions and the values to the point now, as you said, I have two young daughters. One is just turned 12, the other just turned 8. And I worry that with each generation, we're moving farther and farther away from our countries of origin. And so I think we do the best we can to instill the values. For me, it's the values, I think, that are most critical so that they grow up understanding where they've come from.
I love that. And because now too, like those values also tie you to your mom as well,
Yes.
right? So it's like a way of also keeping her memory alive through them as you incorporate that into your upbringing with your mom. It's a way of bringing her into their life as well.
Absolutely. I often think about, I mean, she's obviously would be their grandmother, is their grandmother.
Yes.
And I think about how all of her love for them is channeled through me. And
Mm,
everything that she could have or would have provided for them, I am that mechanism, for it to get
love it.
to them.
Yes, it's you're that vessel. Plus,
Yeah.
I always say this to other people. I mean, I now have my kids. My kids did meet my mom before she died, but the the parts of who we are those little bits of pieces of our mothers as well. So like you said, it's not only the channeling the love because of whatever our beliefs may be, even of just that energies component, but just even just who we are pieces of our mother. So they are getting to know them through us as well,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yes. Now, let's go back to your 20s. You had finished
Mhm.
your undergrad. You're about to
Yeah,
go to law school. Take us into that time period of your life,
yeah.
please.
So my mom had a chronic illness for that she was diagnosed with when she was in her early 30s called ulcerative colitis. And so it was something that she managed for quite some time. Um, and I vaguely remember growing up that for the most part I felt insulated from her illness. There were days when I would come home and I'd find her, having come home from work early and saying that her tummy was hurting her, or if she had really spicy food, she would not feel well. But for the most part, my memories of her were this, strong, independent physician who was somehow magically balancing being a devoted mother and wife with being this incredible professional, giving back to her community. So, all of the things I remember about her are all so beautiful and wonderful. And I have to almost search for the memories of when she wasn't well. And so, she lived with that for many, many years. And it really wasn't until I had graduated from college. I was searching for what I was going to do, what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I ended up returning to DC for a year, which now in hindsight was a gift because that was a year I was home with her while her health really started to deteriorate. At the time, I was wallowing in my, what am I doing? I have a college degree. I'm working at a gym. That's what I was, a receptionist at a gym, of all things, after you finish college. And yet I was with her, which was something that's priceless. And so that year I spent with her, and over time, this was now 2020. I graduated 2000. I spent an extra year working near my university. So this is now fall of 2021. And that's when her health really started to
Wait, fall
deteriorate.
of 2001. Oh,
Well,
one.
2001. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
We're like 20, we're like, wait, yeah, I
2001.
know.
Yes,
2000 in the
2000.
2000 and then to 2000.
Yeah.
Okay, I know
So
I know it's
I
crazy
always
that we've lived all these decades, right?
It's crazy. So what's really striking to me was that 9/11 happened September 11, 2001. June 2002, she died. And it seems strange to say this, but I remember thinking at the time, because there were so many lives lost in 9/11, that she was needed to help all sort of welcome all of the countless individuals who had lost their lives from the terrorist attacks, that somehow she was needed more than she was needed here. I remember
Mm.
distinctly thinking that because it was only what, 8, 9 months after 9/11.
It's so interesting how each of us finds a way in some shape or form to bring us a sense of meaning or comfort in these type of moments, right? A lot of us end up attaching ourselves to something because it helps us in that process. So I love that you found in your 20s a way of kind of easing your soul of that pain by making this beautiful way of seeing her as this physician that's going to be
Yeah,
she's
that
now
she
a
was needed, that
yeah, she
people
was
were suffering and she was always helping people.
that's
And
so
some higher spirit was saying, "We need her here."
That's so beautiful
Uh,
that you made that. Now, so this is in June, then you were about to then go then into college, then that fall, so end
yeah.
of August, September. It was that in was that in your same city or in another city where you went to law school?
So June of 2000, it was June 2nd
Two
when he died.
2002?
Yes,
2002.
yes.
Okay.
Forgive me if I keep saying the wrong dates. June 2nd, 2002, my sister had gotten married in April. She was released from the hospital to attend my sister's wedding, where hundreds, it was a traditional Indian wedding, hundreds of people from around the world came for this wedding. And I remember she was in a wheelchair and I wheeled her around. And it, again, to make meaning of it, like she was meant to see all of these loved ones and friends before she transitioned. And so she died, which was, as I was thinking about this conversation, I mean, we make meaning of all of these experiences, but the pain of it, even 20 plus years later, is unimaginable. And then, yes, so after that happened, my sister goes off to New York to do residency. She followed in my mom's footsteps and actually became a pediatrician, just like my mother. I leave to start law school in North Carolina, where I knew no one, starting over. And my dad is left all alone here in DC. And again, it was something that I don't think I really understood or appreciated how each of us experienced our own grief at the time in different ways. I mean, for a decade, my dad was alone, and I was also alone, and my sister was building her career and family. And we were all experiencing it in so many different ways, yet I don't think we ever really acknowledged or appreciated how we were all grieving.
Would it come up in conversations when you guys would talk on the phone? Do you remember, like, when
I
you would call your dad to check in? Do you know if it was something that you'd even share your emotions around it?
It's so interesting. I often think about memories and I get so frustrated with myself because my memory, I'm also 47, going through perimenopause.
I'm already in the
You're
I've
there.
already hit my yeah, I'm 49 and
So
I've
you know what I'm
already
talking
entered.
about.
So
So I,
I hear you.
yeah, I'm always searching for memories. And a couple of years ago, I think I told my sister how frustrating it is because there's so much I don't remember. And she told me, it's okay, memories will fade, but you'll always remember the feelings that you had, which is my only solace because I do get frustrated that I can't remember details. It's like little snippets. So even conversations, no, I mean, we really didn't talk about it a whole lot, especially early on in the first few years. My sister and I would sometimes, check in about it. I think I probably talked about it more with her, but it was just not discussed.
Mm.
And that's why even today, we don't talk about these experiences. Yet
Is it
they're so,
com
yeah,
is it uncommon to talk, like, culturally too? Is it
yeah.
something that is just not like, in general, people don't talk about their feelings or their emotions or when things are not going, let's say, as planned? Is it culturally something you don't do?
I think there's certainly a component of that, right? Of not wanting to be negative, and
Or burden
or
somebody
or
yes.
burden someone, or this notion that it's been so much time. Why would it even, I think there's absolutely components of this. I think a lot of times early on, people just don't even know what to say to you or how to respond. So it's just silence. But yeah, we didn't talk about it nearly as much. I think over the years we've definitely talked about it more, but not back then.
Not then. When you were in college, then you're here experiencing your grief of your mom's passing. This
In
is
law
in
school,
law school, law
yeah.
school.
Mhm.
How what did you use? What were your tools then? Do you remember that? Like did you like I'm a verbal processor. I talk a lot. Of course hello, why I have a podcast. Um so I might share with friends or like talk about things of my emotions and things like that. And but what did you do? Do you remember?
I do. I do. So I get to North Carolina. I had no idea what law school was really about. Uh, I my first year, I felt it was a blur. I very much remember feeling like I was just going through the motions, but I wasn't really present. And that was reflected in how I did that first year. I did end up finding this grief counseling group that I went to, and it was at this beautiful building with a garden outside. It was very peaceful. And I remember I would even go there occasionally when we weren't meeting just because I found peace there. And I remember walking in, there was one girl my age, she was early 20s, and then everyone else, it was all of people who had lost their mother. Everyone else was, their mothers were like 80, 90 years old. And so I remember this one young woman and I clung to each other because we would sit in these sessions where, and again, this is not about comparing grief, but we're in our early 20s and people were saying, my mom lived a full life where she was 90 or she was 80, and our mothers were in their early 50s. And so I did do that. And I do think I found solace in her because she was my age. We were experiencing similar things. And that really, really helped. So, yes, that was my main resource. Probably my only resource was that grief therapy group. And I don't know what would have happened had I not had that as a resource.
Yeah, you had well, first, yeah, you had community. You had someone else that could relate to your grief, because that's the thing too. We feel so alone, and a lot of times not knowing whether what we are thinking, feeling, going through, like you said, kind of going through life that first year, not even like a zombie, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Like just going through the motions, that people around us don't get it, right? If when we're going, so to find somebody else that got it, or that was so important. So I'm so glad you had that.
Well, because I remember feeling like I was looking at the world with through a different lens. I would hear my classmates stressing about not having done their reading for class, and I just couldn't comprehend or relate. So I actually had a very hard time relating to people that first year. I didn't really build strong friendships until my second and third years. The relatability just wasn't there.
As you're saying that, it reminds me of my own story, because my sister died when I was 21, and so going and I was starting. Had I already started that call? I'm trying to think if I know it was going to be my first semester at a new university. So same, and it was just changing, universities. But that feeling of like, I don't people don't even know what you're walking through. And but that concept at such a young age, just like similar to you, 24, I was 21 when I
Mm,
had that. It's this aspect of like empathy of everyone around, because if I'm going through this and I'm walking, who else around me is also experiencing something hard, like we don't know. We
you
don't
don't.
know. And
And
so
that is,
having more empathy of how sometimes people react when people respond negatively at a grocery store, like when, people that are helping you in retail or things, and like you do not know what everybody is going through and how it is that they behave because of these.
yeah,
And
no,
that
no,
only really,
yeah, no, it makes me think of, in an odd way, the gifts that my mom's death gave me. And I think one of those gifts is this ability to understand that people all have stories. And often what we see on the outside is not what's really going on. So to not judge, to have more empathy, to have more compassion, I think those are all things that her passing has allowed me to develop more for myself and others.
yeah, it just changed. Like you said, it
Yeah,
changes the lens through which you see the world. And like even you said, the priorities you have in your life just completely shift. Thank you for sharing that.
absolutely.
those aspects of the gift. And it's so hard sometimes to like say it, because when you say, even just with the name of this podcast, with grief gratitude
Mhm.
component of it, it's that it's not that you would want this to happen in order to, it's not ever that. It's that this happened. Now I am this, or
Mhm.
now I have this. Now I have these gifts. It doesn't mean you would have not wanted it not to have, you know what I mean?
Of course. Yeah,
Right? It just,
absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly right.
yeah. So, yeah, it's always good to see it in that perspective. So, tell us now, years later,
Mm.
you getting married, or however it was that you
Mhm.
came to now be a mom. Tell us that journey and how that impacted your grief then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard when you're young to imagine your life without a mother. You know, there's so many milestones and moments of life, and I'm lucky to have had her for 24 years. I really feel for young children who lose a parent even earlier in life because for me, you know, even graduating law school I was so proud. She was not there in the moment physically to celebrate, but the fact that I got through, I just that she wasn't there for it, and yet I was so proud that I was able to do it. And any other major milestone, right? Like when you're a young woman, you're thinking about your wedding or you're thinking about having children. A mother, a grandmother figure, I mean, it's really, at least for me, it was very hard to imagine anything without her. And yes, I mean, Eve, so for many, many years, I couldn't fathom celebrating Mother's Day. You know, when you walk through the aisles and all the Hallmark stores, I mean, even to this day, it makes me cringe just a little. Um, the dates, I think I was telling you it, you know, before this podcast that dates matter to me in a way that they never did before. Her birthday, um, the day that she died, the day I become 54, which will be in 7 years, which seems like nothing. Uh, so all these milestones, I think for me, what changed was when I had my daughters. And even though they don't have a grandmother physically present in her, I know she's there. And like I said earlier, I channel all the love and everything she would give them through. I'm the vessel for that. I love that word. But it's hard. It's hard going through anything major in life without somebody who is a loved one. And in my case, you know, somebody who was just so influential and impactful for me. So it's been a journey, right? I think these are all journeys, and I even think about, you know, I hope I get to be a grandmother, and I hope I live long enough to be that for my children should they have kids. But I think any milestone, it just hits differently when you don't have someone like that there physically.
What you're saying about milestones, I think of something, and I was just actually doing the math here with yours, because I don't know if this, do you think of the how many, because this was for me when I had
Mm,
lived more than the 18
yeah.
years that my sister was with me, when I had already exceeded the 18 years of her not. Did you feel that way? Because it's been
Uh,
23 years
so
for you.
24, right? So now I'm 47. So
23.
I've
20,
lived
you're about to be
without
24.
I've lived without her, I think the same, if not more than I had her, right?
No, I think it's just no, because let's see, 47 minus 24.
Yeah,
No, you have one more year before it's 24 years. So it will be
right.
exactly a midpoint in when you turn
Which
48 of
yes,
your midpoint of your life, in
yes,
which you've lived the
the
same amount of
same
time without
yes,
your mom than with her.
which
And that
is
those are the kind of things that just like,
yeah. So you get it with your
I
sister,
get
right? It's
it.
these dates, you
I
know,
get
it's
it.
these date yes.
I get it. With my mom, I get it. Well, I get that part. It's not because hers is more recent. I get the part of thinking, like lately, I've been thinking, oh my gosh, my mom was my age right now when I got married, like those kind of things. And so, yes, as my mom died in her early 60s, of course, I'm about to enter 50s. So I'm like, I'm only 12 years away from so
Yeah,
yes, all these things
yeah,
we do mark. I think that happens to everybody. I'm curious now, people listening to this podcast, if that's your case, please email me
yeah,
and tell me if that's the case too for you. Like, if you do this, what Jaya and I do,
yeah.
like of comparing, because it is so interesting how
Yeah,
our
even the
mind
other
works.
I turned 48 sorry, I turned 47 this past, on April 1st, so 2 weeks ago, and it struck me, I kept thinking, "Wow, if I knew I only had 7 more years left," because that's when she would die, right, 54,
Mm-hmm.
how little that is.
So,
You
yeah.
know, how little if I knew that I only had 7 years, like, what would I thought about it, I said, "What would I do differently? Like, what would
Mm.
I do differently now?"
What would you do differently?
Oh my gosh. That is a really
It's a
good
loaded.
question. That's
It's a
a
loaded.
loaded, loaded question. I might have to sit with that one, Kendra.
Yeah. No, because it's so
I think we should all ask ourselves, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, how would we even live today if we knew this was, it's not, and that's the thing. We all literally are living on borrowed time. We
Yeah.
really do not know at all. So, why is it that we take each day for granted when we really do not know if that's our last day? It is
Yeah.
something
It's the one
I
you
think about.
yeah. It's the one thing we all have in common,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that we will all inevitably experience this.
Yes.
And we don't know when necessarily, but we will all go through it.
And yet we talk so little about it. We talk so little about our own mortality and the mortality of everyone around us. We are so fearful of that, yet it's something that's guaranteed. But we are not able to have these tough conversations of even saying what our own wishes would be for when we die, or when,
Yes.
it's like we talk about, oh my gosh, on my wedding day, I want the la, la, la.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that with on the day? I've done it. I've told Carl, my husband, I'm like, by the way, like, can you guys just like put some music? And
That's
although,
right. I did the same thing. My sister, you pop my sister and I did the same thing a couple weeks ago. She was like, "Okay, so it has to be a party. There has
it's
to be good
dancing.
music,
Exactly. There's got to be dancing.
drinks."
Something that reflects us.
Right, mocktails,
Oh my
cocktails.
gosh. Is this still? Yeah.
You're
Okay. I'm
good, you're
sorry. Still
good,
recording. Okay. Okay.
you're good.
Yeah. It's, yeah, something that reflects who we were in this life. Like something, like do that in the funeral too. Like something that reflects us or
Yeah.
personalities. Yeah. That would be so
Yes,
cool.
and we both said it should be a
Yes.
celebration of life, right? A
Yes.
celebration of the years that we had and who we were able to be and what we were able to contribute. So at least I know my sister's got my back.
I know. I told her the same. At least I know that Carlos knows that. My husband knows that,
Yeah,
and so hopefully we at the same time, I say I know you have to do something that's like meaningful to like that brings some kind of meaning to those that are left behind, that helps them in their grief
yeah,
journey as well. So I get that. It's a little selfish for me to just think how I want to be celebrated, but at the same time, it just would help. I feel like it would help, those behind to do it in a way that's mirroring who the person was to them in life. So anyhow, that's
yeah.
like we could have a whole other podcast just talking about what what that would look like.
Well, I think
Now,
that's actually where a death doula can I don't wanna jump to that, but
yeah, no,
whenever we get
please
to
do.
it.
I was just going to ask you. I was just going to ask you about that. So, yeah, what then? When did the thoughts of being a death doula come to mind, and that you're in this process of wanting to be one?
Very, very recently. I have been and I don't know if you can relate to this at all, but I have, for the longest time, felt like I am this crazy obsessed person about death. Like, when after my mom died, I probably got every possible book on death and dying that existed. I mean, I was looking for answers at that time, so I was curious, like, where did she go? What happened to her when we die? Logically, physically, what happens to us? So I was searching for answers. I remember obsessively reading the obituary section of the paper because I wanted to know there were other people who were young who also died. Like just these obsessive, odd things that someone could perceive as being weird.
Morbid, like they say, morbid,
Morbid.
dark. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
I
yeah.
read
Yeah,
a
that's what
lot of
people
books about, death and dying, and I don't actually think it's morbid. I think
I
it's
at all. I don't
right?
think it either.
I don't think it either. So I've always had this, obviously from my own experience, but this curiosity, fascination with dying. And then, and I read a lot. I'm an avid reader. So maybe a year ago, I read this book. You might have heard of it. It's called Briefly, Perfectly Human by Alua Arthur. I'm going to show you. No one else can see it, but it's this book. And it's about this woman who, I kid you not, we live parallel lives. So we're both former legal aid lawyers. We both actually practiced the same kind of law when we first got out of law school. We're both women who were perceived as being very young when we were new lawyers. She also felt in many ways like she was living a life based on what society expected of her. She often felt like an outsider. Crazy enough, she was actually on the Pacific coast when she heard about her brother-in-law who was very, very ill. Just like I was on the Pacific coast when I got a call from my sister that I needed to come home. I mean, it's uncanny. So anyhow, I read her book. She has a company, I'm going to plug it. It's called Going with Grace. It's all about her journey leaving the practice of law to do death work. And what's so interesting is that she describes death work as activism at its core, because she is an activist. She's a lawyer. I consider myself to be an activist. And this idea that you are witnessing either a beautiful death, which I think we all hope for, or you're watching a loved one suffer and not wanting other people to bear that burden. And so she talks about her journey from leaving the practice of law to becoming a death doula. It's the same as birth doulas. I mean, I never had one,
My
but
sister's a birth doula. So yeah.
oh,
So and it's interesting because we both looked into the death doula because my
oh,
sister's a birth doula. And it's the same. It's not ushering a life in and ushering a life.
yeah,
It's not much different. It is you're just ushering and accompanying somebody going through this transition.
yes.
Right?
And you're supporting them,
Yeah.
and you're supporting their loved one,
Yeah.
and and just to me, there is a beauty in it. I mean, we come into this world, we transition into this world, we will transition out of the world. And so into whatever is next. And so that's what I believe. And so if I can help someone, and I don't know, I mean, in my application, I'm getting trained in July, and they ask you, is this for personal, or, what do you hope to do with this? And I don't know. I mean, at the very least, I'm thinking, okay, well, when it's my time to have these skills, or when it's the time of a loved one or a friend to be able to be equipped with these skills, how beautiful is that? And then if I should decide one day that there's greater meaning for me in doing this work. But this book really, it did change me and made me think about it. Opened up this whole new universe of work that I would never have even known about, because we don't talk about it. We talk
We
about
don't.
birth doulas.
Right. And yeah, I only really found out about death doula after my mom died. I had never even heard that there was because I kept on like thinking because my mom's death was beautiful. Like it was beautiful, and like you said, like leaving with grace. Like what is it that she says? Going with
Oh,
grace.
yes, going with grace.
My mom went with
Which I
like
love.
it was all of us around her. There was
Mhm.
prayers, there was music. It was just exactly how she wanted it. So it was so spiritual. And I know that not everybody, like, I have no clue who, like how my sister died, for example. She was in a hospital alone when she died. It was just the situation was different. So it is it just yeah it's just so beautiful to be able to see that there is this work and so many people now talking more about this transition. So we're talking about transitions. We're talking about this major transition that you experienced yourself of now being someone without a mother, the transition of
Mhm.
motherhood now.
Mhm.
So let's talk about this eh, grief that occurs in transitions in life and which ones of this
Mhm.
before this to after this and that
Mhm.
in between part and the grief in that.
Yeah, and I think transition's the right word, right? Like we transition into the world, we transition throughout our lives, we transition when we die, right? So it's to me, these are all different ways of transitioning. And I think we often think about grief solely as the loss of a loved one. What I've realized, especially in the past 5 to 10 years, is that grief can manifest itself in many different forms. So during COVID, I was really struck. I mean, there were countless people who were losing jobs, who were losing their health. And I think for many people, it was a period of grief. It was losing how we used to operate and having to transition into this new way of being with one another. So I think it really struck me during the pandemic. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, and even now that so many folks who are losing jobs, the way the world is shifting. I think I've realized over time that loss and grief show up in so many different ways. And the other one that I can really relate to is around identity. And specifically, becoming a mother, which I'm not at all suggesting is a loss, right? That's not the message I want to send here, but it is in a way the shedding of one identity for another. It's not longing for the past, but it's discovering who am I becoming now. And I think we're almost always doing that in life. We're changing, we're evolving as people. And in some ways, it's not a sad, this for me is not obviously not a sad loss, but it is a transition into who I am now and what is my identity as a mother versus who I was before. Because motherhood, in and of itself, just like the loss of a loved one, but in a different way, is a transformative experience. So I think my perspective on grief and loss has expanded to recognize how it shows up in so many different ways and how we really have to support one another. And I think about this a lot in the workplace, given the work I do around inclusion. I think we have to really create space to talk about these experiences and to recognize the impact that they have on our lives.
You said it beautifully. The part of motherhood, I actually my first episode in on my podcast 5 years ago
Oh,
had to do actually with the grief I experienced as a mom. And for mine, it was that shift of identity was huge for me. I did not recognize that that's what was happening in me. And it for me it was this there was an aspect of the longing of the who I was. Just like there's still an aspect of sometimes longing when someone dies of wanting to be who we were before they died or having them in our lives. There was part of me that was missing the person I was before, that I was not able to figure out how to bring along for this new ride of how I was becoming, who I was becoming.
yeah.
So yes, so that was a big one for me in identity.
I can see that. I can see that too. I mean, I think for me, it might be sort of the loss of sort of an ability to be
Mhm.
carefree in a way that as a mother, I've lost a bit of that because I am a
Yeah.
caretaker. And that is in many ways my primary responsibility. So I have to be, a protector and uh, someone who can be the safe harbor for them. And I think I do remember we all, the life before where I was able to be a bit more carefree and free spirited. I mean, those are the words
Yes,
that
yes.
come to mind. And missing that a little bit and saying, oh, I wish I could sort of experience that
Right.
again.
Yeah, it's so true because it's not, there's even times in which I'm like, oh, let bungee jumping. I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't do that now. I would have before probably, like, but I wouldn't do that
Yeah.
now personally, like or I personally would probably not jump out of, do parachute, whatever, out of a parachute
Yeah.
either, unless it's all of us.
It's all or
All four
none.
of us. I'm like, we all jump out. Then I'm okay. But
Yeah, so no, so those are all the transitions, and there's more to come,
yes,
right? I mean,
all
as
the time.
children get older, we are constantly
All the time.
evolving and changing and becoming, and I think inevitably that means we're losing something about ourselves to bring in something
Yes.
new. There's often grief with that.
Yes, and it's okay. That's the thing. It's acknowledging that those emotions are okay to have and that not everybody experiences life's transitions in the same way and that's okay too. Not it's just yeah, for somebody get it changing jobs could be easy and they don't end up feeling, grief then. For other people, they do. It's different of like, okay, did you get fired? Did you choose to leave? Did you choose, even if you chose to leave a job, you still might miss certain things of the other
Yeah,
job. The stability, or like, oh, you're becoming an entrepreneur. You used to be an employee. You may miss some things of that. Yeah, there's just so many different things.
friendship, I
Oh,
mean, we could
oh,
list them
so many
all, right?
friendships is a huge
There's
one.
just so
Yeah,
many,
when we
so I get
outgrow sometimes we outgrow friendships or other friends outgrow us, and we have to
absolutely,
be
yeah,
okay with the fact that they're shedding certain parts and that where they are in their growth may not include us and being okay with that. Things like that. It's just so many
exactly,
things. But it's
yeah.
grief is very big and encompassing and knowing that just makes us comprehend the world just a slightly bit more or at least our emotions around certain things.
Well, and hopefully also live each day such that when we are at that point, we feel like we've lived the full life that we
Mhm.
could have lived. I mean, that is yet another gift. In the back of my mind, I don't take it for granted, right? What we were saying earlier. And so my hope is that when it is my time, and this is not morbid, my kids would be like, that's not morbid, that I can feel like it's this beautiful change and that I've lived a full life and I'm ready for what's next.
Yes. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm the same. I feel exactly the same way. The other day, the other day, I say the other day, I sound like a little kid. Yesterday, when it was like 2 years ago, uh, I was thinking of that. I'm like, I'm actually content. If something were to happen, I'd be content right now. Yes, was there more I would want to do in my life? Yes, but there always is something more we would want to do. But being content with who we are right now and being at peace with wherever we are, that if
Mm,
today was, I'm like, I'd be okay. Like that's, I don't know. That was my thought.
mm.
Again,
No,
morbid.
yeah, I mean, I think I would be if it weren't for my young children. Like,
Yes,
the for
exactly.
me, the big fear is losing them not having a
Yes,
mother, especially when you know what it's like to
correct.
not have a mother, even if later in life. But for that, I'm with
Yeah,
you.
it's not like if it was about me, I'm like, "Oh, okay." It's yes,
Right,
we're more like, "Oh my gosh, would they be okay grieving me?"
right.
That kind
It
of
was
thing.
what we were saying earlier, the people
Yes,
around us, as opposed to our own fear for ourselves, in a way.
exactly. I know. Yeah, there's so many layers. Okay, so we talked slightly about your work. Just explain how it is that what it is exactly that you do in the inclusion space with work and how you see grief show up there.
Okay, so let me try to say this in a concise way. My work that I've been doing for the past 10 years or so is about how do we create inclusive workplace cultures so that organizations can be effective, productive, successful. Because in order to be a strong team, in order to be a strong, successful business, we need to have a variety of perspectives in place, and we need to have a sense of people feeling seen, heard, valued, recognized. So that is what my work is in a nutshell about. And like I said, I think part of that means creating spaces where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered. And that means recognizing all aspects of an individual, including experiences with grief and healing. And so I think for many individuals, certainly for me, my experience with grief was isolating and in some ways othering. And I think we struggle to talk about these experiences in the workplace. So if we truly want people to bring all of who they are so that they can contribute the best that they can possibly contribute in the workplace, I think we have to acknowledge and support colleagues when they're grieving, to have supportive policies, to encourage self care, to practice empathy. I think it's hard to look at an individual and not recognize this experience.
Oh my gosh. As you were talking, I'm like, I wonder if because I'm like, if she's not going to say that she does something in the inclusion space of including grief, this is me and my mind. After we finish recording, I'm going to tell her she's got to like do something about advocacy about that. Like in my head, I'm like, as you're saying, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I thought she was like. It's
I
so,
mean, I witnessed it this year with a dear friend who's a colleague whose young sister died. And the way, number one, she couldn't separate it from her role in the organization. She was experiencing profound grief. The way her colleagues, we showed up for her in this time of need is an example of just that. To allow her to talk about it, to feel what she felt, to be there when she needed us, to support her when she couldn't focus on her work, and to be there with our arms open when she came back.
and and that's the thing. It should be that way in every type of workspace, and knowing that for what one person may be grief, like again, we kind of start putting these categories. Even the loss of a pet, for example, right?
Yeah.
It's huge for some person. That is their whole world, is being a parent of a pet. And when
Yeah.
they no longer have that pet, I don't know if it's acknowledged in the workspace as it should be. For some people, that is like as if their closest family member had died, because this being has been in their lives 24/7 for the past certain number of years in every single. So yes, I think that's amazing work that you do of inclusion and having that. So, oh, thank you for what you do with that.
More work to be done in
So
that
much
space.
work to be done. Yes. And so
Yeah.
that's exciting. New ways of being able to keep on having these conversations, outside of podcasts, outside of our friendships, including them in the workspace, and how it is that we can start making more changes. So, Jaya, I like to ask people if there's something that you want to share. Is there something I have not asked you that you want to make sure that you share before we talk a little bit more of how people can connect with you?
I think one quote that has stuck with me for years, that has also stuck with me and helped me, and you've probably heard this quote before. I'm going to just share it because it's really gotten me through in certain moments. The quote is, "Grief, I've learned, is really love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All of that unspent love gathers up in the corners of your eyes, the lump in your throat, and in that hollow part of your chest." And it's just a reminder that we grieve because we have deeply loved.
Thank you for sharing that. And now let's share how people can get a hold of you. Jaya,
Sure.
yes, how can
So
people
I am
connect with you?
active on social media. I'm on Instagram at being.jaya, and I'm also on LinkedIn, Jaya Saxena. So those are the best ways. And if anyone wants, I'm always open to entertaining conversations. And of course, for you, Kendra, if there's anything I can do to support you in your work, I think this is such a valuable space that you've created. And I am so, so
I
grateful.
am grateful you're here, Jaya, and I will share the links, of course, below in the show notes. So please click on those. Follow how you share a lot of inspiration on your Instagram. Way more. I literally, I only share like when I'm going to post a podcast, like when a podcast has come up. So I am,
I'm trying, but
you
this social media stuff is not
I know
easy.
it is not. It's a full-time job in itself. I'm like, yeah,
It's a
that's like,
full-time
I'm like,
job.
man, that takes a lot of energy. So, thank you again for sharing so many different aspects of your life and how grief has really helped you become who you are. And it's part of your life and how it is part of all of our lives. And to keep on being an advocate for other people who are grieving in the workspace as well. Thank you, Jaya.
Thank you, Kendra. I really appreciate you and your work. Take good
You
care.
too. Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.